At Sunset International Airport, Sarah Williams, a single mom, rushed through the busy terminal, holding her daughter Lily's hand. Both were exhausted after a long flight from their small town. Lily, tired and hungry, tugged at her mom's sleeve asking for food. Sarah's heart sank as she checked her bank account balance on her phone. The numbers on the screen reminded her of the tight finances she had been juggling for months. This trip was for a job interview, but the stress of money and her daughter's needs weighed heavily on her mind. They finally reached baggage claim, hoping for some relief. Sarah stood at the baggage claim, feeling the weight of the long journey pressing down on her. Lily, her young daughter, tugged at her sleeve, complaining about how hungry and tired she was. Sarah could barely focus on the bags passing by on the carousel. Her mind was filled with worries, her tight budget, the important job interview tomorrow, and her hopes for a better life. As the bags came around, Sarah, distracted by Lily's constant pulling and her own exhaustion, grabbed the first suitcase she saw. It wasn't until she stepped away from the carousel that she realized the mistake. The bag in her hands wasn't her old, worn-out navy blue suitcase. It was a sleek, shiny Samsonite. Sarah's heart dropped. She looked at the luggage tag and saw the name Alexander Crawford neatly written on it. This wasn't her bag. She had grabbed a stranger's suitcase by mistake. Panic flooded her as she realized that her carefully packed bag, which contained everything for the interview, was now in the hands of someone else. Her stomach turned at the thought of losing everything she had worked for. "Mom, what's wrong?" Lily asked, noticing her mother's frozen expression. Sarah stood still, holding the wrong suitcase, her mind racing. How could she fix this? How could she explain to a stranger that she had taken their luggage? And worst of all, how would she go to her job interview without her bag? Her heart sank deeper as she realized the situation was far worse than she had imagined. Later that evening, Sarah's phone rang as she sat on the edge of the motel bed, trying to calm Lily, who was now playing with her stuffed rabbit. It was the motel clerk. "Hello, Miss Williams," the clerk's voice crackled through the receiver. "A man named Alexander Crawford called. He said there's been a mix-up with luggage. He wanted to make sure you're okay and mentioned he'll be getting in touch soon." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Alexander Crawford? The name on the suitcase tag. She hadn't expected to hear from him so soon, and she wasn't sure what to think. Her mind raced with questions. Who was this man? Why had he been so quick to call? Did he know she had his luggage? Before Sarah could process more, there was a knock at the door. She opened it cautiously, and the clerk handed her a paper bag with a diner's logo on it. It smelled warm and comforting. "Dinner for you and your daughter, courtesy of Mr. Crawford," the clerk said. "He figured you might be stuck without anything to eat with the luggage mix-up. There's also a note in there for you." Sarah took the bag, her hands still trembling slightly. She opened it to find 2 cheeseburgers, fries, and a couple of chocolate cakes, enough for both her and Lily. She was grateful, but at the same time, she couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious man who was trying so hard to help. She unfolded the note that came with the meal. The handwriting matched the tag on the suitcase. The note read, "Miss Williams, I believe we've exchanged bags by mistake. My sincerest apologies for the confusion. I've taken the liberty of sending you and your daughter some dinner. I hope this helps. I'll be available to meet tomorrow morning at noon at the Regency Hotel to exchange our luggage. Please feel free to reach out to me when convenient. Kind regards, Alexander Crawford." Sarah stood frozen for a moment. A strange feeling stirred inside her, a mix of relief and curiosity. Sarah and Lily sat at the small table in their motel room, eating the warm food that had been delivered. The cheeseburgers were a welcome change after the long day of travel, and Sarah couldn't help but feel grateful. Lily ate eagerly, her little hands grabbing at the fries, her face lighting up with each bite. For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to relax, watching her daughter enjoy the meal. As she chewed her own food, Sarah's mind wandered back to Alexander Crawford. She thought about the note he had left, his kindness, and how quickly he had gone out of his way to help them. The food was a simple gesture, but it meant so much to her in this stressful moment. But even as she appreciated his help, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was all too strange. A man she didn't know had taken time out of his day to make sure they were fed, and now he was offering to meet her tomorrow to swap their luggage. Sarah glanced over at the suitcase he had sent her, his elegant Samsonite. It was so much more luxurious than her own worn-out bag. The shiny surface and the sophisticated design made her feel out of place, almost like she didn't belong in his world. She debated whether she should contact him now or wait. The job interview tomorrow was her only chance at a better life, and she needed to stay focused. But part of her couldn't help but wonder, Was there more to Alexander Crawford than just a helpful stranger? The next morning, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. The car service is on its way. I've arranged for a driver to pick you up and get you to the Regency Hotel. Don't worry about the traffic. I'll make sure everything goes smoothly. Sarah stared at the message, feeling a mix of surprise and gratitude. She hadn't expected him to go this far to help. She quickly checked her phone for the time. It was already getting late, and she needed to make sure she was on time for her luggage exchange. She grabbed Lily's things, then looked around the small motel room one last time before heading outside. When she stepped out, she saw a sleek black car parked by the curb. The driver, dressed in a neat suit, was standing by the back door, holding it open for her. "Miss Williams?" he asked with a warm smile. "I'm James. Mr. Crawford arranged for me to take you to the hotel." Sarah hesitated for a moment but decided to trust him. She nodded and climbed into the car with Lily, feeling both anxious and relieved at the same time. The car ride was smooth, and as they drove through the city, Sarah couldn't help but notice the difference in surroundings. The buildings seemed taller, the streets busier, and the whole area had an air of luxury she wasn't used to. When they arrived at the Regency Hotel, Sarah's eyes widened. The grand entrance, the marble floors, and the shiny chandeliers inside made her feel completely out of place. The hotel looked like something out of a movie. She felt a pang of insecurity, wondering how she could ever fit into a world like this. Sarah stepped into the lobby of the Regency Hotel, her heart pounding. The luxury of the place made her feel small, like she didn't belong. She looked around, trying to spot Alexander Crawford. She didn't have to wait long. A man in a sharp suit approached her, his tall frame and confident walk catching her eye. "Miss Williams?" His voice was deep and warm. He extended his hand with a kind smile. "I'm Alexander Crawford." Sarah felt a rush of nerves but shook his hand, surprised by how firm and gentle his grip was. He was even more handsome in person, tall, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples. There was something magnetic about him, something that made her feel both nervous and at ease. "I'm so sorry about the mix-up with the luggage," Alexander said, his expression genuinely apologetic. "I really didn't mean for any of this to happen." Sarah nodded, still trying to get a handle on the situation. "It's all right. I didn't realize I'd grabbed the wrong bag until later. I was distracted with my daughter and everything else." He smiled softly. "I completely understand. It's been a bit of a whirlwind, hasn't it?" They sat down at a small table in the lobby, where Alexander opened the suitcase she had brought. He glanced through it carefully, checking the contents before speaking again. "I wanted to make sure everything was okay in here." He paused, his eyes meeting hers with a strange intensity. "There's something about this bag that's more important than it looks. It's not just a suitcase, you see." Sarah felt a chill run through her. She wasn't sure what he meant, but she sensed there was a deeper story behind it, one that he wasn't ready to share just yet. As Alexander continued to sort through the suitcase, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to the mix-up. After a few moments, he closed the suitcase and looked at her seriously. "There's something I need to tell you about the contents of this bag," he began, his voice low. "It's not just any luggage. This was meant for a charity project I'm working on. Inside, there's $200,000 in cash." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "Cash? Why would you have that much money in a suitcase?" Alexander sighed, his expression a mix of frustration and determination. "It's for a medical purchase. The funds are meant for a hospital foundation that I'm involved with. We're trying to buy critical equipment that could save lives, but the regular transfer methods were too slow, so sometimes cash is the only option." Sarah was taken aback. She had no idea that such a large sum of money was tied to a cause like this. She was even more surprised that it had ended up in her hands by mistake. "I never expected something like this to happen," Alexander continued, his gaze softening. "But this money, it's more than just a transaction for me. It's part of a larger mission to help children who desperately need medical care." Sarah listened intently, feeling a shift in her emotions. Alexander's words were powerful, and there was something in his eyes that told her he was telling the truth. As he spoke about his work with the foundation, she could hear the pain in his voice. "My mother worked hard to support me in my education," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "She died when I was young. She was a single mom too, and she did everything she could to give me a better future. That's why I do this work now, to make a difference, to honor her." For the first time, Sarah saw the man before her not just as a stranger who had helped her, but as someone with a deeply personal drive to change the world. She felt a growing emotional connection between them, knowing that their lives had been shaped by similar struggles, even though they had taken very different paths. As Sarah and Alexander continued to talk, her phone buzzed with a message. She glanced at the screen and her heart skipped a beat. It was a news alert. Breaking news. FBI investigates Alexander Crawford for possible fraud involving Chicago Children's Hospital Foundation. Her stomach tightened as she read the headline over and over. The very man who had helped her and gone out of his way to make sure she was comfortable was now under investigation. Message quickly followed. Authorities claim millions of dollars may have been misappropriated through the hospital foundation. Crawford, the foundation's board member, is a key figure in the investigation. Sarah's hands shook as she lowered her phone. She couldn't believe what she had just read. How could this be? Everything Alexander had told her about his work, his drive to help children, seemed so genuine. But now, everything was being questioned. She looked at Alexander, who had noticed her silence. His face showed a hint of worry, but he didn't say anything right away. Sarah felt a wave of confusion. Was he really a part of a massive fraud scheme? Could she have been wrong about him? Alexander spoke quietly, his voice steady but with a hint of frustration. I know what you must be thinking. But please believe me. This is all a misunderstanding. The foundation is being targeted by someone on the inside. I'm trying to expose the truth, not cover it up. Sarah didn't know what to believe. Her instincts told her that Alexander was trying to do good, but the evidence against him was hard to ignore. She had to decide, should she trust him, or was it safer to distance herself before she got caught up in something dangerous? Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the news she had seen earlier. The more she thought about it, the more questions came to mind. She had to know more about Alexander's past. She decided to look into it, hoping to find something that would explain everything. As she searched through old news articles, she stumbled upon a story about a tragic hit-and-run accident from years ago. The article mentioned that Alexander's mother, Maria Crawford, had died outside a hospital while working 3 jobs to support her son. The details in the article were haunting. She had been struck by a car, and despite several witnesses, the case was never solved. The more Sarah read, the more she realized the strange connection between Alexander's past and the current investigation. The article mentioned that the car involved in the accident was a black Lincoln Continental, the same car Alexander had mentioned in passing. It seemed like a coincidence, but Sarah couldn't ignore it. Just as she was about to make a call to ask more questions, the hotel lobby door opened, and FBI agents rushed in. Their sudden arrival made Sarah's heart race. She could feel the tension building. They were here for Alexander, and she was stuck in the middle of it all. In that moment, Sarah knew what she had to do. She trusted Alexander, and she couldn't let him face this alone. He had shown her nothing but kindness, and the good he was doing with the foundation couldn't be ignored. Without hesitating, Sarah stood up and walked toward the agents. She took a deep breath, ready to take matters into her own hands. She wasn't going to let Alexander be wrongly accused. She believed in him, and now it was time to prove it. With determination and Alexander's help, Sarah found crucial evidence that exposed the corruption at the hospital foundation. She uncovered hidden records that proved Alexander's innocence and showed how someone within the foundation had been stealing funds meant for medical equipment. The FBI quickly took action, and the truth came out. As the investigation unfolded, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had stood by Alexander when everyone else doubted him, and together they had uncovered the truth. Alexander was cleared of all charges, and the hospital foundation's corruption was brought to light. Sarah felt a sense of pride for being part of it, knowing she had made a difference. With the cloud of the investigation gone, Alexander's support didn't stop there. He helped Sarah secure her job at the publishing company she had interviewed for. Catherine Preston, the publisher, was impressed by Sarah's work and her persistence through the chaos. With Alexander's recommendation, Sarah was offered the position, marking the beginning of a new chapter in her life. As Sarah settled into her new job, she realized that things were finally starting to fall into place. The future looked brighter, not only for her but also for Lily. Sarah had worked so hard for this, and now, with Alexander's support, she felt like she could breathe again. One evening, as they sat together at a quiet cafe, Alexander looked at Sarah with a soft smile. "I've been thinking," he said. "How about we go on a real date? No more business, just us." Sarah smiled back, her heart full of hope. They had both come a long way, and now they were ready to explore something deeper, something full of promise and new beginnings.